Go ahead. Is
Our mission, Helping Parents Heal, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting bereaved parents. Through support and resources offered, we aspire to help individuals become shining light parents, meaning a shift from a state of emotional heaviness to one of hopefulness and greater peace of mind. Helping Parents Heal goes a step beyond other groups by allowing the open discussion of spiritual experiences and afterlife evidence in a non-dogmatic way. Helping Parents Heal affiliate groups welcome everyone, regardless of religious or non-religious background, and encourage open dialogue. Attendance at all meetings is voluntary. All discussions that take place at affiliate-led meetings are confidential. We hope that participants will learn from and share with each other. Zoom meetings run by leadership are not confidential. These meetings typically feature guest presenters and are posted on YouTube so that affiliate members worldwide can watch and benefit. Neither type of Helping Parents Heal meeting is designed to replace traditional therapy or spiritual counseling. Helping Parents Heal offers a wide variety of speakers, allowing parents to learn about many possible ways to heal. This includes presenters covering progressive topics such as afterlife evidence and connecting with our children who have passed. The views expressed by our guest speakers may or may not reflect the opinions of Helping Parents Heal leaders and members, so we ask that you take from their presentations whatever may benefit you personally. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you could join us this evening.
Thanks, Irene. I will introduce Curtis. I want to say, first of all, that I've known Curtis, I feel like, for a while. I've interviewed him once on my podcast, as Elizabeth indicated, but I started following Curtis several years ago. While attending his degree in communication studies from Oakland University, he experienced an internal battle with depression that led him to question God and his lifelong interest in Swedenborgian theology. That's a big word, Swedenborgian, and we'll talk about who Emanuel Swedenborg is or was. After a period of intense suffering, Curtis recovered from his depression with the help of modern medicine, therapy, and a return to the spiritual uplifting messages he found in Swedenborg's writings. So for you, those of you who don't know, Emanuel Swedenborg was an 18th century spiritual explorer. He was a scientist, he was a theologian. He wrote many books that are just as relevant today as they were then. And I believe the Swedenborg Foundation actually makes those works accessible to a modern audience, including ourselves. Curtis is the host and producer of the weekly program Swedenborgian Life, which has accumulated more than 30 million views and nearly 120,000 subscribers on YouTube. He's appeared on numerous spirituality themed talk shows and has had his content featured on the Dr. Oz show. He works with his team at the nonprofit Swedenborg Foundation to create simple, effective inquiries into life's biggest questions. So as I said, I discovered Curtis after Shayna's passing, and it's been a Swedenborg and Off the Left Eye has been a big resource to me. So I'm excited to welcome Curtis Childs to Helping Parents Heal tonight.
Great. Thank you so much, Brian. It's good to see you again and nice to meet all the rest of you. Yeah, I want to cover a couple of things here. I will give a little bit of who I am and my background and my work with the Swedenborg Foundation, but I also want to talk about my experience as what I know we here call a shining light sibling and my own coping with the loss of my sister when I was young, as well as I watched my parents turn into shining light parents. And that wasn't how they were right at the beginning, but they have gotten there, and I see them shining in all these amazing ways, even after losing their daughter. And a thread that runs through all of our recoveries has been Swedenborg's insights. And you gave a good introduction to Swedenborg. I would say, if you don't know him and you're interested in the afterlife, you'll be very glad to learn about it, because I just think it's a wonderful supplement to our knowledge of the fact that life does go on and what that's like. The thing that Swedenborg gives that I really love, I love near-death experiences. I've read a ton of those. I know in Raymond Moody's book, Life After Life, where he coined the term near-death experience, he has a whole section on Swedenborg, because Swedenborg was somebody who was hundreds of years before the modern near-death experience phenomena, writing very similar things. But what's cool about Swedenborg is the detail and the breadth of it. So I was once talking with, we had a couple actually featured on our show who had their son killed in the terror attacks in Nice, France, which was a number of years ago now, but they had gone through this horrific experience of hearing that those attacks had happened and trying to find their son, and not, learning that he had been killed there. And you can go watch our episode with that. And there was all kinds of amazing insights that they had, and ways that Swedenborg's description of the afterlife had helped them. But one thing that really stuck with me is Paula, who's the mother. She said that what really meant something to her when she encountered this Swedenborg's description of the afterlife is that she knew that Nick, her son, was still somewhere, but she couldn't picture what's his life like. She couldn't, like, what's he doing today? Does he have friends? Does he have a house? Does he have a job? Because when we have somebody that we love that's like gone physically, just on another continent or something, what helps is to be able to know what their life is like. I have a little nephew who's in Istanbul, and we get to see little updates of what his life is like, so we can imagine that even though we don't get to see him. So to be able to learn what life is like for people, it helps. It helps. Nothing's going to replace them. I don't think any of us are looking to go back to exactly how things were before, but there's different ways of soothing that and healing from that. So I'll get to a little bit of that in a minute, and I'll tie it into my own story. So I had to really take the afterlife question seriously from a young age. I was always interested in thinking about things that were relatively deep, but when I was 6, my family was on actually not a vacation, but we were coming back from my aunt's wedding, and we were on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and we got in an accident, and everyone had injuries, but my sister, she had to get helicoptered right away to a different hospital. And I didn't really know much more than that at the time, but I remember very clearly when they told me that she was going to die. And I was a kid, so I was playing with Duplo, which is like that big kind of Lego, in the lobby of the hospital. And I remember when they said that, I had this tower and I smashed it over. And I don't really remember a lot more about those times. I remember I was told the things that I said, if Annika died, Annika is her name. If Annika died, I'm never going to laugh anymore. I'm never going to play anymore. I'm never going to smile anymore. And so for a while, nothing made sense. As a kid, it's a different kind of a while. I mean, there was another story later of me approaching some neighborhood kids and saying, Annika died, and then we just go and play. So it's like with a kid, it phases in and out. I've certainly had to try to grapple with it more in my adult life now that I could face it, and it kind of bubbled up in the introduction that Brian gave that was talking about I had this experience of depression that just sprung up when I was like 18 or 19 in a pretty intense way. And there's probably all kinds of factors, but I think one thing is I was starting to have to cope with that. So, but throughout it, there was the idea that she's still herself and she's somewhere, even if I can't see her, was powerful for me in a couple of ways. Two that I want to mention are trips to heaven, and then a dream that I had. So trips to heaven, because both my parents were readers of Swedenborg and had a strong conviction that life continues. Something that is actually, I had always thought that my dad thought of it, but he told me later that it was actually his sister, my aunt, or two of his sisters, my two aunts, who thought of do this with them. What he did was, he said, when we were going to bed, I had a younger sister who had survived like me. And so when we were going to bed, he would say, all right, do you want to go visit Annika in heaven? And I remember being so excited for that. It was just him. It was sort of like a guided meditation. He would just say, all right, imagine that we're closing our eyes and you go and then you see her and this is where she lives and this is what she does. And I just remember the excitement of like, we're going to heaven. It was real. It felt real to me. There was a little bit of, that was a little augmented because one of my aunts who had told my dad to do that, she had a couple of what you would call visitations from Annika. So she was meditating and believed that she was able to actually see some of Annika's life, and that Annika had a new name. Amiona was her name in the afterlife, and that she was happy then, and she was meeting people. And I think that part of that was helping us to paint a picture of where she really was. And I know that the descriptions of the afterlife that Swedenborg gave helped reinforce that and make it real for my parents. I never had, our people in my family never really had much direct spiritual experience encounter with her, which I know is like a frustrating thing for a lot of people. Actually, we talk about, I have a YouTube channel that's gotten so many views. A lot of that just happened. Like I didn't know what would be popular. We put out videos on things and some of them would take off. The first one that really took off, it was called, "Why Don't Our Loved Ones Who Have Died Communicate With Us More?" Because that's such even that example of, I had an aunt who was having these spiritual experiences, like getting to go see Annika, but my mom wasn't, and I wasn't. Why is that? That's not fair. That's not fair. So in the show that we did, and that was actually based off of, I have a guest in that show whose name is Dr. Jonathan Rose, who is a really brilliant soul and has had plenty of his own experience with loss as well. But I saw him actually giving a funeral, because he's a reverend as well. And he had this segment in there where he was talking about, according to Swedenborg, why it is that you can't always have the contact with other people, with people in the afterlife that you want. And it really came down to just the systems are complex. So right now, we are able to talk to each other on the internet. But if a thunderstorm came through here and knocked out the power, even if I still cared about all of you and I still wanted to talk to you and you still deserve to hear a message, I mean, the system would be out. And so I think that there's an element to this. The spiritual world is real. It's real. It's real, just like the physical world. And so for contacted things to happen, things have to be in a certain order, and that order can get messed up in all kinds of ways. So it's not because you're not hearing from your loved one because they don't care, or because you're not worthy of it, or whatever. People think all kinds of things, but it's if they could be here, they would. I do think a little bit slipped through though, because I did have one dream that really stood out to me. And it involved Lego, which I never thought in my life about how, oh yeah, I was building that tower out of Duplo when I heard that she died. But in my dream, what I remember about it was I was somewhere in a room with Annika and we were playing with Lego, except for in this, so Lego people have little legs that you can take off of them. I don't know if you've ever played with, or your kids play with Lego something, they have little legs you can take off. And those are like a static piece of plastic. But in this dream, I could take those and with my fingers, turn them into a different piece of Lego. I remember turning the legs into a piece of hair, or you can put a little hair piece on Legos. And I thought this is amazing. It's amazing that you can do it. And then she gave me this big hug. I remember telling my parents, like, I really could feel that she was hugging me. Like it stood out even to my 7-year-old brain that this was different than a regular dream. So I was later told by my aunt, who had continued to have these visions of her, that she saw a vision of her putting blankets over my family while we were asleep, and that she put a green one on me, and that it was green because that I needed extra healing, and green was a healing color. So oh, we're getting almost to 20 minutes already. So that's the very beginning of my story of healing from that. It was really, as I got older and really started to look into Swedenborg's description of the afterlife and the rationality of it and the believability of it, that it really strengthened me to the point where I feel like, oh yeah, she's there, and I'm excited to meet her. And if I had to really quick summarize what the message is, it's that you're still you after your body dies. The death of the body is almost a small event when you really think big picture, because the people that you love are still there, and to them, it's not going to be long for you to get there. Time doesn't work the same way that it does here, and that your love for them is going to actually literally pull you to them. That love in the spiritual world is like gravity. Here, the reason that I am on the planet rather than zipping off into space is because gravity holds you there. Spiritually, love is what brings us together. Swedenborg has this beautiful concept where he says, thought brings presence and love brings union. So I believe that when you're thinking of those that you love, that actually literally brings your spirits close together. Because we're all spirits right now. You have the conscious part of you, according to Swedenborg, that's your spirit. And you have a body, but your spirit, just like your body's in a room somewhere, your spirit's in the spiritual world right now. But your spirit can be close to them, and then the love that you have brings this union. So what's been really rewarding to me has been seeing other people who are suffering in the same kinds of ways that I did find the material in Swedenborg and find comfort from that. I mentioned Paula, but there's been so many. It's by far grief and people dealing with loss is how the largest group of people find us. And I find that people are really looking for an affirmation that life continues on, and that the love that they put in to these relationships, it matters. Like it continues on. And that's something cool that I found in Swedenborg, is that the love relationships that we have here, it's not severed by the death of the body. The really physical things are external. The love is a spiritual thing, and that is actually what life is all about. And the spiritual side is more real than what we're going through here. So even though there's I would never try to say, oh, now that I believe in life after death, it doesn't hurt when somebody dies. It hurts everything. It always hurts. But there's a kind of healing that can be brought with the knowledge that I'm going to see my sister again and see her in a way that I never would have before. I'll close with a quick story about my grandmother, who was married to my grandfather. This is on my mom's side, and my grandfather, my middle name is Leonard after him, and he died before I was born. So for my entire life, I just knew Donette, my grandma, as being this person who had this awesome amount of light. She was an educator and touched a lot of kids' lives. There's this guy who's now the CEO of a big company who had all these learning disabilities and stuff, and she was the one who tutored him and got him to believe in himself. So she had all this impact, and she was absolutely sure of the idea of life after death, and that her husband was there and still waiting for her, and that she was just like, she was really committed to what's going on here, but I could tell like she was just rearing to go, like she wanted to see him. And it was about less than a year ago, and she was, I believe, 91. She did leave this world, and I just think about what they feel for each other now is something that they never could have if they didn't have that separation. It doesn't mean we didn't wish it didn't happen like that, but some good can come out of it. And I think that's another central message in Swedenborg, is that no matter how bleak anything seems, goodness can come out of it. And so I'm confident that when I see Annika again, she's going to love me, I'm going to love her, with this amazing depth. And so it goes for everyone that we've lost. So there's that's what I wanted to say. And now I know we're going to do some discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Curtis, so much. For people that don't know, if you could tell us a little bit more about Swedenborg's life and why it is his work is so important, because he writes about the spirit world, but why is it what gives him the authority to write about the spirit world?
Yeah, a couple of things that are remarkable about Swedenborg. One is he was absolutely brilliant and a famous scientist when he was having these experiences. He was a celebrity scientist. He was a leading inventor. He was a leading scholar in things like anatomy. He had a high position in Sweden's mining industry, which was a major industry for a global power at the time. He was in the circles of nobility. He was absolutely looked to as an intellectual pillar in his time, founded certain branches of science, brought the first scientific journal to Sweden. The list goes on and on and on. It's almost comical. He was a true Renaissance person. So that's noteworthy on its own, and that he found that his experience of the spiritual world was not at all in conflict with this things he had learned about the natural world through science. What's just remarkable is that he didn't just have one experience, but starting in his mid-50s, he was having experiences every day for the last 3 decades of his life. And using that scientist brain and all the training that he had he had published a ton of works on all kinds of scientific fields. He used that same rigor and organization to in a detailed way catalog everything about, not everything, tons about the world to come, and do so logically, rationally, give you not just what happens, but why it happens. It's a field guide to the afterlife that, like, I don't think anything else exists. I don't think there's been any recorded spiritual experiences that lasted for nearly that long. Or he published 30 volumes on them, and they were all very well organized and very well written and really profound and way ahead of their time. A lot of the things he was writing then are now things you'll hear plenty of people saying. And also the things people are reporting now tend to sync directly up with Swedenborg. So one of the most common responses that I have when people encounter Swedenborg's message online through our videos is like, "Oh, this fits with what I always knew to be true," or "This was a missing piece in these things that I had." There's parallels in what he wrote to Zen Buddhism, as well as a number of other faiths, as well as he was considered a Christian mystic in his time. So I think that there's never quite been a phenomena like Swedenborg. So I think there's a lot of reasons why he's noteworthy, but I really think the main one is he represents this comprehensive view and a straightforward and clear view of how everything works, and also represents this marriage of science and spirituality in a really profound way.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that the fact that, like, one of his experiences, he talks about what it's like to die. So we have people now that have NDEs, but he actually was able to have, that experience.
Our channel name is Off the Left Eye. So if you go to youtube.com/offtheLeftEye, that's us. If you search Swedenborg, you'll find us too. But Off the Left Eye is from an experience he had where he says he was shown the dying process. He wasn't in physical distress like a lot of people who have NDEs are, but he records step by step the process. Oh yeah, there's the link in the chat. Step by step the process. And at one point he says that it seemed as though, he says, everything in the spiritual world, there's kind of imagery that represents what's going on. I think of it a lot of like how we now have videos with graphics in them, but he said that it seemed as though a covering was being peeled off of his left eye, which gave him the use of his spiritual sight. Because he was, way before there was science on the hemispheres of the brain, he was saying that spiritually the left side has to do with intellectual things and the right side has to do with emotional things. So to have a covering peeled off the left eye symbolized the freeing of the intellect. And we decided that our channel is about sort of giving information that hopefully brings some light to your intellect, but the right side which is like the volitional or the doing side. That's up to each one of us to take concepts about spiritual things and life after death and use them to go make the world a better place. So yes, his experience of the dying process was one powerful one that impacted what we do, but there's just so much other useful and novel and comforting concepts that he has that we like to try to illustrate, because the way that he wrote them, it's philosophical, it can be dense, it can be difficult to follow. I love nothing more than digging in there and making it clear for people, because it was those concepts that really saved my life a couple of times. Just when I was in my depression, when I was struggling with a lot of things, that it reminded me and showed me how life is good, and how I can trust what things are. And when you are really helped by something, you feel this sense of obligation to make it available to other people. You want people who are hurting like you hurt to feel good like you felt good. So that's what's driving me and driving our team to try to make everything in there really accessible and really, so we really want it to be clear as to why it's worth your time.
Yeah, absolutely. We do have a question in the chat. Kathleen asked, did Swedenborg believe in reincarnation?
We did a show that's called, we have 1,000 videos, so I sometimes struggle to recall the title. I think it's called Do We Reincarnate? And in that, we gathered everything that Swedenborg says that I think would relate to reincarnation. I think the answer with Swedenborg is usually no and yes on everything, because, but I'll say he never reports coming back into a body in the physical world, like a lot of people will associate with reincarnation. He talks about life progress. We continue. The whole episode was, here's what he says that's different than the theory of reincarnation. Here's what he says that's the same of it. And he definitely says that you continue to learn and grow and change forever. That's at the root of a lot of reincarnation. And even that you go in cycles, but he talks about those cycles happening in the spiritual world rather than a full return to the physical world. So there are things like the idea of karma, which is often associated with reincarnation, where you say, okay, if I did something bad, then negativity will follow me. If I did something good, positivity will follow me. He doesn't talk about that happening in the physical world. Like, you can see that very kind, nice people seem to get really bad breaks, and self-centered people seem to do great at times. But in the spiritual world, that happens in a much more direct way. So you can check out the episode for more about it. But he generally says that who you are as a person, and even the form that you take is so uniquely you that couldn't be grafted into something else. So Annika, for example, she's still her. So I wouldn't get there and then she's gone into another form or another body or something. That I know a lot of people, there's widespread, maybe not disagreement, but people have differing views on it. So I don't think it's a deal breaker either way. I know that one thing Swedenborg said is that really what matters is our loves rather than our beliefs. So if I'm coming from the belief that what we're trying to do is love each other and make the world a better place, and I have a certain set of beliefs about afterlife and you have different ones, if we're both coming from that same love, then we're on the same team. So I think that's as I understand it, how Swedenborg describes it.
And I know some people might want to know, like, would you call Sweden being Swedenborgian? Would that be a religion, or would that be a philosophy, or how would you describe it?
I think throughout the time since he published his books, people have approached it in both ways. Swedenborg, all he ever did was write books and publish them and distribute them, and then try to publicize them and meet up with people. He never engaged in, he didn't found a church, he didn't give religious services, he didn't even have followers that followed him around. What really he was publishing, and he would go and like try to meet with royalty and professors and things and try to show them why these ideas were important. But he was really just distributing ideas, and I think he was hoping that they would shape the cultural conversation and introduce these concepts into the mainstream. So since he died, there have been groups of people that found his writings really valuable, and they've taken sort of these two paths, and what do you do with that? Some people have formed church groups around it. There's a lot of talk of the kind of things you find in churches in Swedenborg's writings. He was, I think, trying to do some reforming of the Christianity of his day. There was a lot of core tenets of it that his spiritual experiences conflicted with. For example, he said that you don't have to be a Christian to go to heaven. He said that heaven and hell are primarily states of mind, that God is never angry, that God never punishes anyone. That was enough to get his works put on trial, actually, like a criminal trial in Sweden. He would have to go out of Sweden to London and Amsterdam to publish, because there was a theocracy at the time in a lot of Europe, and so you couldn't do that. So there was certainly religious kind of content in that. Some people have taken that and formed different church groups. There's also, though, been this thread of influence outside of church groups through thinkers, Ralph Waldo Emerson, William Blake, Helen Keller. There's a number of some of the founding fathers in America. There's been notable people who, Martin Luther King Jr. had Swedenborg in his library. We don't know how much he was reading it. We know he had a good friend that was a Swedenborgian minister. So you can do it in either way. Some people are in a Swedenborgian church. Some people use it as a life philosophy. I think the approach that we take on our YouTube channel is much like Swedenborg's approach. We're not part of a church. We're a not-for-profit organization, and we just want to distribute the ideas and let people do with that as they want.
Yeah, as I've studied him through your channel, I haven't really read a lot of it. I've just studied their channel. I see him as a scientist, an explorer, someone who's reporting, someone who, it's really cool because we have these NDEs, but this guy actually crossed over and had that scientific mind, that 50 years of that scientific brain to come back and say, I'm going to report this way. And the correspondences, which if you could talk a little bit about correspondence, that's another big thing that's really huge for me.
Sure. Yeah, he was definitely an explorer. And in the time that he was writing, direct observation, which we take for granted now, but that was really starting to come into this is how you find things out, is through direct observation. And so he would put forward, for example, he would, in the subtitles of his books, he would say, a description of heaven and its wonders from things heard and seen. There was actually recently a Netflix movie called Things Heard and Seen. It was like a horror movie. I don't know if everyone saw it. That phrase is out of Swedenborg's works. And there's actually people in that movie who are reading Swedenborg, and it was a big. We did a reaction video on our channel. It's big, but that. So he's absolutely an explorer, and he is absolutely trying to appeal to the rationality of his readership. So he will say, use your rationality and think about this, or consider this. He's not demanding that you believe something. And explorer is a great word because he did peruse so much of the afterlife. There's a quote from Kenneth Ring, Kenneth Ring was a co-founder of IANS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. And he had in an intro of a book about Swedenborg and the near-death experience, he wrote, people who have had a near-death experience have peeked through the door into the afterlife. Swedenborg explored the whole house.
Yeah.
And I think that what I found for people who, I'm gonna speak at the IANS convention coming up later this year, people who have, or next year, people who have studied near-death experiences or had near-death experiences, a lot of times they really benefit from the structure that Swedenborg lays out that gives context, because you're probably not going to open up a page of Swedenborg and get as vivid an emotional experience as you do with NDEs because they're modern, but you will get this framework that can be so enlightening and really tie the pieces together. One of the things is correspondences that you mentioned. So correspondences are the universal symbolism through which the spiritual and physical world communicate with each other. You dream in correspondences. Swedenborg talked about having angels near him who were discussing something, and every bit of their conversation came into his dream, but in imagery that was familiar to his memory. So in this example, they were talking about a certain kind of superficial mindset that people can have. So in Swedenborg's dream, a person that he knew, that he believed had that mindset, was in his dream and talking to him. If you ever had this, well, what was that person in my dream? I had David Spade in my dream a couple of nights ago. And he's a comedian. I don't know if you know of him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even like, I've seen a couple of his movies, but it's not like I know him a ton, but he was there. He played an important role in this dream. So the correspondences are this universal language. And Swedenborg said that the original divine revelation was the correspondences in nature. So you can learn all kinds of truths about life after death and about the nature of God and reality through the way that nature works, the way that trees grow, the way that the sun affects. He talks about how the way that the sun changes plant life in summer. He was an avid gardener. That's a correspondence, because the sun, in order for it to make things grow, it has to present heat and light together. If you just have light like you do in winter, nothing grows. And to him, heat is a correspondence to love, and light is a correspondence to wisdom. So everything that heat does physically, love does spiritually, and everything that light does physically, truth or wisdom does spiritually. To try to explain that in a way that's tangible, when you have just truth or just concepts, but they're not driven by love, it doesn't really bring things to life in you. Because you could have somebody who knows a bunch of information, but is cruel with it or uncaring with it. It's only when you really put the love together with the truth that things come to life. Water corresponds to truth in a different way. So if you look at like what's everything that water does for your body, water quenches your thirst. That's just like the way that knowledge quenches your mental thirst. Water can be used to clean things, just the way that truth can clean things out. So to him, everything that you see around you, everything is spiritual. Everything is telling you something about how spiritual reality works. This is also, he asserted, the language that the Bible is written in. Why does the Bible spend so much time talking about how to build certain temples? Why spend 20 chapters talking about every little bit of the temple? Because it's a correspondence, it's a symbol of the kinds of things that you can read in nature and the kinds of things that come up in your dreams. There's this universal symbolism. And it's not even just like I'm telling you something, it's the actual reaction of the physical world to the spiritual. He said that the physical and spiritual world are so united to each other. It's like the skin and then the muscles in your arm. If the muscles are the spiritual and the skin is the physical, it's like the ripples on the pond and then the pond. The two are interacting with each other all the time. You and I, the life that's in us, the life that's in everything is spiritual. And the most clear correspondence that he gives anywhere is he says, if you want to understand what correspondences is, think about a smile. A smile is not the feeling of happiness, but it's what happens to your physical body when your spirit is feeling happiness. So when you're really feeling happy, and then your body smiles in reaction to that, there's a correspondence. Because what's happening spiritually, that happiness is imaged physically in your smile. That's why you can have a smile that's not genuine, because I'm happy, but you're not really. That's not a correspondence, because the two are not matched up. But if you think about that, what's an image of happiness would be a person's face smiling. So that's the correspondence there. We have many shows about this, but that's hopefully a good start.
Yeah, correspondence is literally changed my life. Just thinking about the way that the physical world is a reflection of the spiritual. And some of my favorite episodes are some of the ones about some of the craziest Bible stories, right? That we read and we say that doesn't make any sense. And he breaks it down in a way where if you take it as a spiritual, as a metaphorical thing, it's really brilliant. So I love those episodes. We do have a question from Elizabeth. She wants to know, does Swedenborg talk about shared death experiences?
I'm just gonna try to go through my mental catalog because he's not using any of the same terminology, in his 1700s, 18th century Latin that we use here now. He certainly talks about the spirit of the deceased dwelling with the spirit. I think he was in that particular case talking about married couples and how when one dies, the spirit of the deceased can be dwelling with the spirit of the one who is not yet deceased. He lays all the framework for it. He says that in the spiritual world, here, I can share sounds with you, and I can share visuals with you, but spiritually, you can actually share feelings. You can share thoughts and experiences. So if, for example, somebody's spirit is doing this transition from the physical to the spiritual world, your spirit could be getting that directly from theirs. And that's how you would have this shared death experience. He talks about spheres or an aura of your life that in spirit goes out all around you. It's like an effigy of your personality, and it can communicate your happiness. And so it makes all the sense in the world to me, even though I don't know if he talks directly about, well, when you're with someone and they die, this can happen, but he lays all the groundwork. Like I said, this is what Swedenborg does. He'll give you, why would you have a shared death experience? How does that work? What's the physics? What's the spiritual physics of it? He will give you the framework and say, yeah, well, everybody, an aura of everyone's life goes out from them spiritually, and every community of spirits has its aura that goes out, which affects anyone who's in it, and can actually, things like knowledge and things like feelings can be communal there. So it makes all the sense in the world. Then in the hospital room, somebody could be taking this trip and you could be spiritually going on it with them. And what would be happening there is that you would be suddenly aware of your spiritual senses. So you have physical senses, you have physical organs of sense, eyes and ears and mouth. Your spirit has all those things as well. That there was a lot of thought in Swedenborg's time that the spirit is this amorphous, formless thing. I think now, especially with the modern near-death experience, people are very sort of automatic to think of spirits as having a human form. He says that your spirit has a form, just like your body. In fact, your spirit is not just connected to your body in one little place somewhere. Every part of your body is connected to every part of your spirit. So your spirit has eyes, and they're closed usually. That what made it so that Swedenborg started having these daily spiritual experiences was his spiritual senses were opened, which can happen for anyone under the right conditions. When the physical senses are made quiet, I think this is why people, when they're meditating, they get these spiritual experiences. So what I would imagine is happening in a shared death experience is you are briefly seeing what your spirit sees and feeling and experiencing what your spirit feels. So it was meant to, like, things were supposed to be for the human race that we all would kind of be living in both worlds at the same time. The way that Swedenborg describes how life was, back in human history in sort of an idyllic early time was that it was absolutely commonplace to be able to talk to people in the afterlife, to be able to see correspondences for yourself, to be able to have direct experiences with God and with heaven. That's how it's supposed to be. And it's part of why it's so shocking and jarring when someone we love dies now. It's not meant to be this separation like it is now. There was, because of, the human race has gotten a lot into self-centeredness and materialism, and this has kind of polluted the spiritual connection that we were talking about earlier. But it's not, Swedenborg was confident that we're going to get back to an era where, again, the norm is that people are at times having their spiritual eyes open. Swedenborg didn't see what he had as some kind of special gift where he was in some category. Hopefully it's going to get back to that's the way it is for everyone. It's not like, okay, let's go on YouTube and search videos. I'll be out of a job then, which is fine. Let's search videos and see, is the spiritual world real? Is there really life after death? Well, I'll read this. It's going to be just, it's not even a topic of debate because we can see it for ourselves right in front of us. I believe, and Swedenborg was very confident that the human race is going to get back there as we all kind of wake up more and more to the importance of love and the reality of something more than the physical.
Yeah, it's an interesting journey that we're on. And that's another thing I learned from Swedenborg is that idea that we were, and it makes sense if you think about indigenous cultures, they're still more connected to that side. And we've kind of lost our way. But a lot of people are saying now that we're on the cusp of getting back there. Where and I love that analogy, our spiritual eyes are closed. I think that's perfect.
Yeah.
Vicky wants to know, does Swedenborg talk about how we plan our lives before we come here?
No, actually, it's funny. We just had this last night. We were just doing a live Q&A show. We had the same question come up. And again, this is just like with reincarnation. This is a point where reasonable people can have differing opinions. Swedenborg, yes and no, but while every moment of our lives is carefully planned and not planned, but like provided for and looked after, that's done by what he calls divine providence, which is potato, but all, according to Swedenborg, all the love and wisdom that each of us have comes from the divine. So there's really like one life that we all receive different parts of. And it's from that divine, that divine wisdom, that love of God is what's looking after us in every moment and making sure that every little bit of our life steers toward good coming out of it. I was talking earlier about how even in tragic things, ultimately the promise of providence is that good is going to come out of these things. So while he does talk about God being able to know what's going to happen, it's really important that we are able to live in freedom and do what we want to do, because only what you choose in freedom really becomes a part of who you are. So for us to opt into things like, for example, love, if you have to love someone, do you really? It's when two people or any number are coming and saying, we both want this, in whatever relationship it is, that's what it is. So it has to be this element of we're living our lives. It's not to say that, there's not tons of care in there. It's not to say that there aren't angels with us every step of the way, working and planning and everything, but he doesn't talk about me, Curtis. Maybe I didn't, but that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of thought going into it. And he says that actually, as we become more and more spiritually awakened, we more and more want to be led by the divine love and the divine wisdom that leads us into community. So as I get more and more spiritually grown, I will continue to want more and more to look to what does divine love and divine wisdom want me to do. So it's a great question. Thanks.
Yeah. So Sherry wants to know, does Swedenborg explain the best way to connect to our loved ones that have transitioned? And is there a way to have visitations with them?
He's frustratingly short on details around that, which is pretty remarkable because he has details on everything. And he has 30 volumes, as I said, of amazingly detailed information. It doesn't seem like he believes that having spiritual experiences is necessary to grow spiritually. I know that he doesn't have anything against them. Obviously, they were this huge source of wisdom for him, but it seems like the take-home message that he had was everything in your regular life can be made spiritual. So if you even he has this principle called usefulness, which is that usefulness, or the doing of something with the intent that it benefits someone, and that's the point of it, rather than I'm going to get some kind of reward out of it, that I'm doing it because I know it's good and I enjoy the idea that it's doing something good. That is why life exists. That is the most important thing. That is what he calls heaven, and that is something that can be available in any time in your life. Right now, if I'm giving out this information and I'm doing so thinking about, well, I know how much this helped me when I was in a dark space, and I'm just thinking maybe there's somebody on this call who that's going to help them. That's a little bit of heaven. When we stop here and like you go and like we all go and like, oh, there's dishes in the sink. You know what? If I do these right now, my wife's going to come out and she's going to feel this like, in the morning, like, nice clean dishes. That's a little bit of that spiritual there. When you go to your job and you're saying, I'm going to try to do this honestly, sincerely, justly, faithfully, because I think I'm going to help the world in my little way, that's spiritual. Everything is spiritual. And it's nice for people like me who have not had any success inducing spiritual experiences. It's frustrating though, because I'd much rather just get to see people that I love and get wisdom and all that right from it. So I'm not saying it's not a pain. And the best way to connect, we do have a lot of shows about that. Your thoughts and your feelings originate in the spiritual world. So you have a spirit that's in the spiritual world right now, and you are being affected, just like right now, you're being affected physically by the sounds that are coming out of my mouth through your computer speakers. You're effectively hearing things and feeling things from the spiritual world as well. And it shows up as in feelings and in thoughts. So when before our live show last night, we had somebody who was just doing like a little group chat with beforehand, and he had some things he's wondering about with the way certain things went with his dad or whatever. But during the conversation, he got this feeling of like, oh yeah, my dad probably thinks I'm doing great. And we were saying that probably is your dad. That is the way, even if it's harder for us now to get the direct experience, the feelings and the thoughts are open to that. So notice what you're feeling, and notice how your thoughts change, and look for that, and know everything good is coming to you out of what Swedenborg calls heaven, or it's coming to you from people that you have a love connection with in the afterlife. So even though it's not as cool maybe as getting to see them and having these experiences, every day we are getting affected positively by the people we're connected to. So
that's another concept that really helped me a lot from Swedenborg, is the idea that we are, and it might be disturbing to some people, but we are so greatly influenced by the spirit world, by our loved ones that are still connected to us and still care about us. And the thoughts that we think are our own are not really our own.
I love it. I've grown to love it. Just because none of the thoughts I'm saying to any of you right now are my own. It's like I've been influenced by Swedenborg. I've been influenced by teachers that I had in my life. I've been influenced by my parents. There's so by shows that I've watched. There's so much influence that's coming in, and I owe my intelligence to that. Swedenborg is just completing that picture by saying you're also influenced by spiritual teachers. It's in your inside of you. And it can be really freeing too, because when I was having depression, I was getting all these negative thoughts and feelings. And to be able to say, okay, well, just because I'm getting this message that I'm no good, I'm worthless, and I need to despair, and things are going to turn out terribly, it doesn't mean it's true, and doesn't mean I have to believe it. It doesn't mean I have to, this is mine. It's just like, usually if my phone ever rings, I don't answer it because it's a spam call. I can already tell. And so I don't pick, if you ever pick it up because you think it's when you need, and they're like, it's some recording that's like, well, the FBI is looking for you, and what you need to do is send $500 to, I don't start worrying about the FBI because I know it's not true. I know it's not, it's not mine. It's not real. So I can do that with negative thoughts and just say, okay, just because it's in my head doesn't mean it's true. And with positive thoughts, I can think like, not only is this something that's occurring in here and I love it and believe it, but this is me also chatting with heaven here. I'm having a little talk with, maybe it's my loved ones or some other good people that I'm spiritually connected to or whatever. It makes you a lot less lonely too. So it's been a really potent tool, and we have a ton of shows about that as well.
Yeah, so I think that answers that question about being connected to our loved ones and our guides and our angels and all that. And then, so we do. It's kind of like the old cartoon, right? You got the angel on the one shoulder, the devil on the other shoulder, and you can choose which one you listen to.
I'm saying, man, it's a powerful image for a reason. And the way that I test, so I can't know when Swedenborg says this stuff. How do I know? How do I know if it's really like that? The reason why I have such conviction about it is I look at what it does in my life. I look at what it does in my life. Does it lead me to happiness? Does it lead me to freedom? There's a story in the Bible about Jesus where he's in a boat with all of his followers, and in the boat, a storm comes up, and Jesus is asleep, and everyone in the boat is freaking out. They're saying, "What's going on? We're gonna get capsized. We're gonna get killed by this weather." And look, he's asleep. And they wake him up and they say, "Wake up!" And he stands up and puts his hand out or says a few words, and the whole storm stops. And everybody in the boat says, "Who is this that the wind and the waves obey him?" I get goosebumps when I say that, because I can hear this weird thing. Okay, there's Swedenborg is this old guy. He has a curly wig on in his portraits. It's a weird thing. Who knows? He's writing all this stuff. But when he tells me something, and then some kind of idea about God or about heaven, about how we're connected, and I take it into my mind when I'm experiencing some depression or something, and I apply it, and suddenly all the wind and the waves in me lay down. That's when I say, like, what is this? What is this? So, it's about the good that's done. So that's really the way that what gives me conviction that this is good. And going online and having all these views that we've had, and having people just write their comments day and night saying this is how this helped them, that's the way I can know. That's the way I can know that, okay, something is good here, because it is bearing fruit in people.
Wow. That is a great way to finish, Curtis. I think you're absolutely right. It's like, how does it affect your life? And I want to thank you for what you do. I want to thank you for putting this work out there. I know it's helped me. Several people in the chat have said they found your channel and it's helped them. So, thank you for being here. Well, we have a tradition where we unmute everybody and now everybody say good night. So Elizabeth, if you or Irene want to say anything before we do that, go right ahead.
Well, first, I'd just like to say thank you. That was really fascinating. And I think that it's going to help a lot of people, and lots of people on here are going to be looking toward to find your YouTube videos, as well as to read more about Swedenborg. But I also want to just say that, as Brian says, your videos are so interesting because they're step-by-step ways of understanding it. So you really do break down what he's saying in a very easy to understand way, with illustrations and with a lot of other props that you use during these presentations. So it's a lot of fun to read them or to watch them. And I think that to start with, those are great. And then to go deeper into it, maybe to read as well. And thank you. So Brian's right. Brian, that was great too. Let's go ahead.
Yes,
and
thank you. And please come back, Curtis. This was such a great evening. We'd love to have you back again.
Yeah.
Good seeing you, man.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Good to
it
see you.
was wonderful. So anybody who would like to go ahead and unmute and say thank you and good night to Brian.
Thank you so much, Curtis.
Thank you. That was
Thank you,
Curtis.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Curtis, thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Curtis.
Sounded really interesting.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.